Well, okay. To start off with empathy, I want to share with you a story. You know, many CEOs and senior leaders, executives, many come to me because they want to come to me as a coach. Many are sent to me because their higher ups send them. You know, they're not getting along with their team. They're causing all kinds of problems, and they get sent to me, and they don't want to be with me. They don't want to be coached, but you know, that's what I have to deal with sometimes. Okay, I mean, I'm talking about executives from companies like Disney and IBM and GE, Nokia. I'm also talking about small business, people working in small businesses, CEOs, partners, senior leaders. And when, and this, by the way, is something that you guys should talk with Post-Privatization Foundation. If some of you feel you need coaching, we may be able to schedule some sessions when I'm here, which will probably be in April and then September of next year, more or less. So let me just share with you a story. Here was an executive who was about in his mid-50s. He was a marketing director, major Fortune 500 pharmaceutical company. And he was sent to me, actually, because he was not getting along with his employees. There were just all kinds of problems that they were having. So what happened was, he comes in and sees me, and he so he's in my office, sits down on the couch, and he doesn't lie down on the couch. I'm not a psychotherapist, but he sits down on the couch. I'm a coach, and although there is a lot of psychology that goes into it, and he sits down, and we start talking, and he says, you know, Tony, look, I don't need to learn about leading from the heart and compassionate communication and empathy and all this other fluffy stuff that you talk about. Like, look. He's like, I've seen your website. That doesn't work for me. He says, look, I have to get results. The CEO that sent me here, he wants results. The partners in the company, they want results. That's what I'm evaluated on. How are you going to help me to get results? That's what I need to do. And so I said to him, I go, so you want to get results. So let me ask you a question. Are you getting the results that you want? No. Okay, well, how about I give you one strategy, and you try this, and if it doesn't work, we'll talk about others. We'll talk about others that might be more to your liking. But I want you to try just one strategy that involves leading with heart. Would you be willing to try just one? He says, well, all right, let me hear. What is it? Okay, this is what I want you to do. I call it the one-question rule. From now on, every meeting you have with one of your team members, I want you to ask them one question. He's like, that's it? Well, not exactly. One question, but not, did you get the report in, doesn't count. Did you draft the new product line, doesn't count. How did you feel about the report you were working on, counts. How do you feel about the new product line, counts. I want you to ask them one question about how they feel about anything. Okay, I can do that. So he goes off. All right, comes back 3 weeks later. And I have to say, I've never in my whole career seen such a change of one man. Bags under his eyes, weathered. He came back in, it was like as if he just was at a spa for 3 weeks. He comes back and he's like, Tony, I couldn't believe it. I went and I did what you said, and I asked this one question, and the amazing thing is that it always led to other questions. And the other thing was I found that my employees are actually pretty interesting people. And they actually have some pretty good ideas. I never realized it. Okay, I went to his retirement party 4 years later, and I coached him for about 2 years. I went to his retirement party 4 years later, and you should have seen this. It was like people saying, I wouldn't have stayed in marketing if it weren't for this man. He's been a mentor for me. It was amazing. And what that's about is just this simple act of making a heart connection with people, showing empathy. Again, people, their deepest human craving is the desire to feel appreciated. People just want to feel, as a leader, that you care what they have to say. You care what they feel. It's really, I would challenge each of you, try the one question rule. Really, every meeting you have for the next few weeks, Ask one question about feeling. How do you feel about something? See what happens. It'll work. So, how many of you know who this is? By the way, quick check here. We can take a break in about 5 or 10 minutes, or we can take a break right now. How many people want a break in right now? Raise your hand. All right. Okay. How many break in 10 minutes? Okay. All right. So we'll do in 10 minutes. So finish a little more here. All right. So, can anyone tell me who this man is? Okay. Ernest Shackleton was a British Navy explorer, turn of the last century. Okay, now, the turn of the last century, remember, Britain's a small island, and its power was in its naval fleet. Okay, that's how they extended the British Empire all over the world. So, in the early 20th century, it was a big time for naval exploration. So, Robert Scott, who was another British Navy captain, around 1908, he took a group of men on a ship to discover Antarctica. So they took their ship, and about halfway down to Antarctica, the men started to complain. They said, we don't have enough rations. We're not going to have enough to make it there and get back. Well, Robert Scott said, no, we're here to discover Antarctica. We're going to make this work. He basically just insisted that they're going to go. They're going to discover the new continent. Well, they did actually get to Antarctica. They got to Antarctica, and they found a note from Roald Amundsen, the Norwegian explorer, who had discovered Antarctica 35 days earlier. Robert Scott and all his men died on the return journey back to England. Okay, 4 years later, another Navy explorer from Britain, a different kind of Navy officer, Ernest Shackleton, set off with the ship Endurance, appropriately named, and his idea was that his team of men, 28 men, were going to go to Antarctica and then be the first ever to traverse Antarctica on foot. Right, so they set out about 900 miles south of Buenos Aires. The ship was pickled in an iceberg. So they had to get off of the ship, and they're all standing on the iceberg. And they all watched the ship sink in front of their eyes as the iceberg gradually crushed it. All right, so there they are on the iceberg. So what did he do? Well, he understood that he, as a leader, had to be attentive to the needs of his men. So those who had high egos, he knew how to flatter them. Those who really would get crazy if they didn't have structure, he knew he had to have structure. So what he did was he set up regular meal times, lunch and dinner every day, the same time exactly, regular times for recreation. They had parties every night where they read poetry and wrote poetry together. They set up a library in an igloo, like in a little, ice structure. And men that got sick, he personally nursed them back to health. Ernest Shackleton in 1912, in a time when you had scurvy and a lot of other diseases, mortality was much lower than it is today. He kept every one of those 28 men alive for 2 full years. And they all returned to England in perfect physical and mental health. Right? Shackleton, whenever anybody was asked, whenever any of his men were asked, how did you survive? I mean, this is in sub-freezing temperatures for 2 years on an iceberg. Imagine. How did you survive? They always said just one word, Shackleton. Right? And what I find interesting about Shackleton is that he grew up in a female household with a mother and his mother and his sisters. And the epithet for him, what he was called by his men, to me is like the greatest compliment a leader could ever get. He was called a Viking with a mother's heart. Okay, that to me is a great epithet because it's a model of how a leader has to balance strength with caring. Being loving with being strong. Being empathetic with being assertive. A Viking, strong, assertive, firm, with a mother's heart, caring, empathetic, supportive. Now, what we find is there are very few leaders that can do this. I tell you, I coach thousands of leaders, and one thing I find is that generally, women who are leaders tend to be better at being empathetic, caring, supportive, nurturing, not as good at being assertive, strong, firm about what they want. Most men, it's the opposite. They tend to be pretty good about being strong and firm, assertive about what they want, not as good at being empathetic, caring, supportive. Right? The best leaders, I find, are able to find their own unique communication style that includes both. So all at once, they are loving and strong. In fact, if you take those two words, loving and strong, and just meditate on those before you have any conversation with anyone, you'll probably do a lot better. Because there are times where we need to be empathetic and listen, and there are times we have to be assertive about what we need, about what we want. I think what we often see is there's a lot of people who are submissive. Submissive meaning they put others' needs in front of their own. But then people that are submissive always end up coming out aggressive. It's like a pendulum that swings between submissive and aggressive. Think about the people you know who are submissive, and then think about the little ways that they kind of, undermine you because they resent not getting their needs met. Whereas instead of being submissive and aggressive on that pendulum, it's better to be assertive, to really be able to identify the needs of others and help them to meet those needs as much as we can, and also to be assertive about our own needs. And that's hard too, to be vulnerable, to admit we need anything. It's hard for us to do that. What I found fascinating as a leadership coach was the Democratic nomination in 2008, because we had two people that totally flouted those stereotypes, totally lived the opposite of those stereotypes. We had an empathetic man, Obama, and an assertive woman, Hillary Clinton. And so that's just it. These days, you get all of the above. And what happens? Okay, let's look at those two conditions. Let's take a look at Obama. If you guys remember back to when he was running for president, what was he criticized as being too soft? And that's what happens. If you're a man and you're empathetic, people say you're too soft. All right, Hillary, what was she criticized as being too cold? If you're a woman and you're assertive, then people say you're too cold, you're angry, and actually sociologically, women get more criticism for being assertive than men for being empathetic. Because whenever you have any group, the minority gets more criticized, and women in leadership positions are the minority. So each of you can think about your communication style and how can you balance empathy and authenticity. Empathy, being empathetic, and being assertive. Because it's that balance that creates the effective leader. So for example, if I'm leading a team meeting, I might ask, so what do you guys think we should do about this? How should we organize this conference here at in Cluj? And people say, well, I think this, I think that we should do that. And I'll listen and try to understand. And then I might say, well, okay, I appreciate that, and I think that I really like this idea and that idea, and I think that we're going to definitely, though, have to make sure that we get the cameras right here in the middle tier. And others say, well, we don't think we want to do that. And at some point, I might say, well, I think it's really important because the sponsors need to have good footage of it, and so I think that's something we should honor for them. And then people get pissed off, right? They're like, well, that's not what we want to do. And so I've been assertive, so I might then need to be empathetic and say, well, but I do want to hear. Tell me your feelings on it. What do you feel strongly about? So it's that balance. It's like the stickiness of communication as a leader, and the same thing at home. It's not just what we often do is called fight or flight. So it's like, this is what I want, and if you don't like it, screw you. And then we distance. And you know why we do that? People that do that is because they fear abandonment. They fear rejection. So it's hard for them to say what they want, and then once they say it, they can't stay there. They have to move away because they fear they're going to get rejected. And then you guys know what I mean? You then afterwards you say what you want, and then you worry about it for weeks. Did I ruin things? Is she mad at me? Is he mad at me? It's hard for us to say what we want. Right, so that's why I think a good way to do it is to that stickiness. You hang in there. You say what you want, but then you also ask the other person what they want, knowing that for the relationship to work, both parties have to be, needs have to be met. So, well, a little bit more on empathy, and then we're going to break in a sec. Is the best companies always, they have to show this empathy. They have to use this empathy. Take for example Starbucks. Starbucks in the U.S. has 4 different store formats, each with 4 palettes. So there's 16 different Starbucks themes you can find. So a Starbucks like at Laguna Beach in California is going to be different than a Starbucks in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And they have these different palettes because they need for the need to fit in with local culture. And we see this all the time. When companies don't observe local culture, it doesn't work. Let's take Walmart. Take Walmart in China. Walmart went to China, and at first they weren't having much success, and then they realized they had to hire a Hong Kong marketing executive to run the chain. And now if you go into a Walmart in China, you're not going to believe your eyes. It's going to look like a gruesome pet store. There's going to be like literally, you'll go to get your fish, and the Chinese like to pick their own food, and they don't like it to be dead because they feel like it's spoiled if it's dead. So they want it to be alive. So you're going to go and pick a fish, and the store clerk right in front of you is going to gut the fish and pull out the guts and stick it in this bloody plastic bag, and you're going to put it in your shopping cart next to your pillows and cushions to take home for your sofa. And that's what works in China. So you can't in any that sort of cross-cultural interaction, in any using empathy is trying to understand what are the needs of our customers. Think about your customers here in Romania. What are their needs, especially in a down economy? So when you're doing marketing, it's not just about marketing with passion, but also marketing with compassion for your customers' needs. Great examples of that. Hyundai Motors. Okay, if you bought a Hyundai and got laid off from your job within a year, they made this policy about a year ago. If you buy a new Hyundai car and get laid off within a year, you can return it, no questions asked. All right, that was a policy for a down economy. Danone Yogurt in Europe. Danone Yogurt decided to come out with a lot more they call them eco packs, smaller packages of yogurt, less variation, right? Cheaper to produce, and they cost less, and they captured the newer market of people with less disposable income. Think about what is it that you're selling? What is your company doing? And what are the needs of your customers? How are those needs evolving? So I'm going to leave you to think about that for 10 minutes, and we're going to take a little break. You guys get some coffee and such. Thanks for great participation. We'll keep going after the break. I hope you had a nice break. Do you want me to switch? Okay, this is fine. Yeah. Thank you. Okay, so welcome back. So we're going to continue talking about empathy, and then a little bit about trust. Then we're going to do a little bit on what are the qualities you need to lead in a tough economy. And we're going to have an exercise, finish with some questions and answers. So I want to make sure any of the questions you have, ask us at 12:30, 12:45 if we haven't answered them already. So what we have up here now is a model. It kind of looks like an organism. And in Britain, the way you spell organization is like organism, but take the M off, like with an S, O-R-G-A-N-I-S-A-T-I-O-N. So you think about a company as an organization. And if you think about it, each person in your company has their own vision for what they value, what they feel is important. And the way I've always looked at it is that your company's vision encompasses the personal visions of all the members, all the people on your team. And the idea for why we have a company is that a company is a place where people can go to realize their personal vision more effectively inside that company than outside. And that's why people come and join your company or your business. So one way to think about, how we use empathy, to go in through their door so they will come out through your door, is to think about like, what is it that the people want that are coming to work for you? Jim Collins talks about, who gets on the bus and where's the bus going? So you have an idea of the vision for your company, where you want to go. You use empathy to try to understand the needs of the people and the visions of the people who are going to come and work for you, and create something that people really believe in. Now, the interesting thing about empathy is that we often think we're seeing the world, but we're just seeing the way we're seeing ourselves. We see the filter we put over our eyes. It's like we put a filter over our eyes and then we cry about the darkness. But it's really just that we have this filter there. We see others not as they are, we see others as we are. And this happens in every walk of life. I'll give you an example. Has anyone experienced this where you're going to look to buy a car, and all of a sudden, let's say you want to buy like a VW, and all of a sudden you see VWs all over the road everywhere, but you never saw them before? Or you want to rent an apartment, and now you go around and you see for rent signs everywhere? They were there before, but you didn't see them, because we see outside what is inside. Now, this happened to me. I bought a house, and I